It's sort of the end of an era, really, in that there were a number of potters of Mike's sort of age who were influenced by the Leach Hamada business, and I suppose now you are the last of them.
Last living entity.
The last living entity. And it's actually nice to do this while you're still with us, rather than...
Well, just living, you mean?
Just living.
Living, yeah.
I remember talking with Ken Matsuzaki, a great Japanese potter, and one of the things he said to me was there are only a handful, maybe two handfuls of people in the world who make great pots. This man is a great potter. You have only to look around at these pots, looking and feeling these things, and you look for a bad one. You look for a mediocre pot, and there's nothing here like that. And even when he had decided that he was going to make this really was his last firing. This was not a pretend thing. This was, it's over. I'm going to finish. Still striving to make the most beautiful show he's ever made, and I think it's fantastic. Can I wind you right back to a little Mike Dodd? Yeah, a very small Mike Dodd. What was the family creative, or what?
Yeah, my father was a lawyer, but he was more of a craftsman than an artist, but he loved making furniture. He got very good. He got almost cabinet maker class. He was good at everything, actually. He embroidered, he made radios, and he did everything, really extraordinary. He never tried pottery, fortunately. So, yeah, no, he was talented in many ways. I came interested in clay when I was walking across a ploughed field. Some cows had got out and they wanted us to go and get them back in, so we had to run across this ploughed field. And one of the ploughs, or two of the ploughs, had this beautiful yellow stuff. I didn't know what it was, so I picked it up and it was plastic, and I had kept that in my hand most of the day until it cracked and just fell apart. And that was my first introduction to clay. I took a scholarship to Bryanston, which I failed. They had a guy there called Donald Potter. He worked with Eric Gill, who doesn't have a very good reputation, but he was a good letterer and sculptor. He worked with him for 8 years. And he would put out Bernard Leach or Hamada and things just on shelves. He didn't say anything, he just put them out. And just through that sort of osmotic way of teaching, I learned a lot from him. And as I left, I'd never told anybody this before, but as I left the school, I went into his tiny little office and I nicked a glaze from his glaze book. I just wrote it down.
Did you catch that, Johnny?
And I used that for quite a long time. That was my first introduction to glazing. But I was obviously thinking, I wasn't thinking about being a potter, but clearly I was worried that I didn't know anything about that side of things. So I stole in order to start my life.
And you went to Cambridge?
Yeah.
And why did you choose medicine?
I think as a child, I never really thought about anything very much. I just went with the flow. And I was good at chemistry and physics and biology. And everybody said, well, you should do medicine. So I did medicine. But it was hard work. And my brain hadn't really been tested. I'd got through O levels and A levels fairly simply without really trying. Got to university and it was bloody hard work. So, and I kept going to the Fitzwilliam Museum and looking at the pots. And I was really moved by these pots. And it suddenly occurred to me, like one of those eureka moments. I don't know if any of you have had them, but I was walking down the street in Cambridge and I thought, I could be a potter. And everything sort of fell away, you know, all my, I didn't realise I was tense at the time, but it just dropped away. And I thought, right, I'll be a potter. You know, I was very naive, particularly about building kilns. My first kiln, as anybody read my book, fell over. You know, I built it. I walked back in the field. I put my hands on my hips to admire my building, and it just.
But did you finish your degree?
I finished the degree. I got, well, at the time, you know, it's quite embarrassing. I got 28%, which was a third degree's honours at Cambridge. And I could have got, and you get, what is it? Is it MB after your name? No, Cantab. If you pay 5 guineas.
And
I don't know whether...
You didn't pay?
No, I refused. Then I started looking for a place to have a pottery, but it was so naive. I mean, if I'd known the problems involved beforehand, I don't think I would have started.
I mean, it's fairly well known that most of the people of your generation who potted actually lived in relative poverty. Did you ever feel at any time that you ought to give up and go and...
No, but I had a guy come to me when in Cornwall who was a doctor, and he'd heard that I studied, and he was incensed that I was a potter. Absolutely incensed. And he tried to get me in the Navy as a doctor. What was your question again? I forgot what it was.
I suppose I was really asking whether you had any feeling of giving up or going to do something else. Or...
No. It's always been a passion. And what else could I do?
Yes. Well, you could. I rather think you probably could have done anything that you'd turned your mind to.
Yeah, but I didn't have a passion for it, so yeah. And I was, you know, I'm very fortunate to have done it. I've been, you know, and I always, well, I did it at one point. I had to give up potting to go into teaching, because I always told myself I wouldn't compromise with the making of pots so that it became commercial. I wouldn't do that. I would do something else. So I had to, at one point, when I lost the pottery in Cornwall, I had to go back into teaching for 5 years.
Tell us about, you are one of the few remaining people who actually met Bernard Leach on a number of occasions.
Yeah, when I was at school, I had a great friend called Peter Schofield whose parents owned a place called Godolphin Manor in Cornwall. Some of you may have been there. And Pete and I at school decided we'd build a kiln each, one at my parents' house and one at his. And so we alternated in the summer holidays. We built this one at Peter's, but we couldn't get the temperature in the chamber. So Pete's mum, who was Peter Lanyon's sister, Peter Lanyon the painter's sister, they all knew each other down there, the Marshalls and so on and so forth. She phoned Bernard, and Bernard, bless him, came out, and we asked him why you know the kiln wasn't reaching top temperature. He said, "Well, look at the chimney," he said. And it was, you know, it was just from one of those laundries that had a metal, you know, those metal things, and it had just had a brick chimney that was 6 inches wide or something. And we were, anyway, he said, "Build a bigger chimney, you'll be fine." And another time, he was just about to send off some pots to Japan, and he phoned up. He didn't phone me, but he phoned Pete's mum and said, "Would the boys like to come over and see my exhibition before it goes?" So we went over there, and he told me, he did some of you may know, Leach did these little orange dots on some of his pots. And he said, "I haven't told anybody this, but it's made of nepheline cyanide and St. Earth clay, 50-50. And I thought, that's brilliant. Why did he tell me that, you know? And I never told anybody, because I thought, well, you know, and I did try it, and it does work, but I didn't use it. Yeah, and then another time, when he was blind, I wrote my first article in Pottery Quarterly called In Defense of Tradition, because of the heart in spite of the mind. And he read it, or rather David, his son, recorded it and sent it to him. And he wrote to me and said, "Would you come down to St. Ives?" So we had a conversation. But he'd forgot while I was there. Because what happened was, there was a thunderstorm outside and there was a flash of lightning. And it sent him back to Japan. It was extraordinary. And he went and sat by the window and talked about Japan for about an hour.
Gosh.
So it was an absolute privilege for me. And unfortunately, he'd forgotten about what we were supposed to talk about. So.
I know, invariably when you could, would buy pieces from other people's exhibitions. And you built quite a substantial collection. But a few years ago, Mike called me and said, I want to get rid of all these pots that I've been buying and accumulating over them. And will you handle it? And I said, yeah, fine. How much do you want for them? And he mentioned the figure, and I'm going to tell you, of 10,000. And then I said to Mike, okay, I'm ready to send you the check. And he then told me which charity to send it to. That's the essence of what this man is about. It is extraordinary, and you've lived your life that way. You put many of us to shame, really, in terms of the way in which you have always felt treated living and kindness and generosity of spirit as more important than anything else. That generosity of spirit is in the work. And I think that when we take them, not as ornaments, but hopefully to actually hold and to handle and to use and to give away and to break, ideally without blinking, stick it in the bin, get another one. That generosity of spirit comes back to us. I think it's an extraordinary thing. There are not enough of us who manage to do something which will give such enormous pleasure. We have been and are very privileged to work with people like you, but what I wanted to do was to say thank you, because what you've made and what you've given the world will live on long after we are no longer here, and will continue to give great pleasure. And for that, I thank you.